like
with
Catholic or something.
Catholic is the predominant Catholic and Orthodox.
I mean, is that just coincidence, or is that actually like? Is there a reason?
It has to do with The reason why this has to do is really with, for instance, race. Right. There's been several Hispanic appointments in the last couple of years, and a lot of the Hispanic population in the U.S. is Catholic. Along with Italians, right? Several Italians have come in, which have changed the dynamic. So as like the race and as the ethnicity shifts, that will also shift religion. There have been improvements in race, ethnicity, and gender. There are currently 3 women on the Supreme Court, which is the highest number we've had. There's an African American on the court. There are 2 Hispanics on the court. So it is more diverse than it's been at any other time in the history of the United States. The first step in becoming a justice is the confirmation process. The president selects the person, and then they go through a series of confirmations. The first step is a very intense investigative process, and there's multiple. The first one is the American Bar Association, which oversees the lawyer profession and the judge profession. They are going to do their own investigation because they don't want somebody to come in who's going to give their profession and their circle a bad name. So they're going to look into background. They're going to look into clubs the person's been a part of. Have they ever committed a crime? Have they ever been in legal trouble? Stuff like that. Then that will proceed to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Will do their own investigative process. Similar thing. Theirs might have a more ideological bent to it, right? Oh, is this person overly conservative? Is this person overly liberal? Is this person anti-abortion, pro-abortion, right? What's their stance on justice issues? All of that will come into play in the Senate Judiciary investigation. But they go through 2 major ones. Once you've gone through that, the interest groups can start to have an effect. If an interest group does not like the candidate, they think the candidate is overly to one way or the other, they might really petition Congress not to approve this person, right? Because they don't want them wreaking havoc. One of the big examples is a guy named Robert Bork, who was nominated by Ronald Reagan. The social interest groups were not a fan of him because of some of his stances. And they really pushed Congress, and he was actually not approved by the Senate. So Ronald Reagan had to go a different route. Once the hearing has taken place, we saw this recently with Donald Trump's appointment, right? He's asked questions or she's asked questions. Pretty grilled. A lot of these questions get pretty intense. Then there's a vote. Then the Senate holds a vote. You either pass or you fail. You either get in or you don't get in. The reason I have this guy up here, this is Clarence Thomas. He is a Ronald Reagan appointment. He replaced Thurgood Marshall. He had one of the most intense confirmation processes that the Supreme Court's ever seen. While it was going down, he was accused of sexually harassing one of his former secretaries. And it became a major deal. That actually became the center of his confirmation hearing. She was brought in. She was asked questions. He was asked questions. It was such an intense process that he only got approved by 2 votes. And it really scarred him. He's very quiet. He doesn't participate. He doesn't really ask questions from the bench, and he refuses to talk to the media. So that really influenced the way he handles himself in the Supreme Court. He is a strict constructionist. He believes that the Constitution says what it says. You should not read anything into it. What it says is what it says, and what it says is what it means.
So, like, is strict construction same as judicial construction?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Does anybody know who this is?
He's an old white man.
How about this person?
Another Supreme Court justice. Oh, is it the... No,
Is it all 9 of them?
How about this guy?
Shania Sotomayor or something, isn't it?
Sotomayor.
Sotomayor.
How about this person?
Another white guy. Another white guy. I got nothing. Someone who's not an
Oh, isn't this the
white...
Sotomayor person? Or the other person was Sotomayor?
I think the other person was Sotomayor.
Oh.
I think this is Kagan.
Let's check the names.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
What?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah.
Clarence Thomas.
He looks a lot different.
Okay. So
Who's the main guy? I forgot.
so there's
This guy.
Kagan, Breyer.
Hang on, don't just read the list. I don't know if you actually know these people.
Oh,
No.
No, I only know
You have no idea.
Sotomayor. Heard of him.
All right, so we know some.
I
we
don't know
know.
anyone.
We know one member of the Supreme Court.
They keep out of the public eye.
They do.
Good.
They do.
Oh, John Roberts was the famous one.
This guy.
Oh. I read about him in the textbook and I forgot his name. That's how.
I would argue to you guys the main reason why there's very little interest in the Supreme Court is that the Supreme Court prefers it that way, and that's what they've created. Okay? They would rather not be in the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, they've secluded themselves from it because they believe it's the best thing for their job. The hearing process is an important thing. The first thing that every case begins with is what we call a writ of certiorari. This is a document that is written telling the court why they should take the appeal, why they should take the case. It lays out the entire case, it lays out all the arguments. Once a week, the justices meet together and they look over writs of certiorari and they decide whether or not they want to hear the case. What has to happen for them to hear the case? Does anybody know? Well, first they got to decide what criteria must it meet.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the criteria that it'll meet is it a question of the Constitution? Is it a federal question? Right? Does it deal with a federal issue? Right? Does it deal with multiple states? Does it deal with an overarching question that could influence many people? Right? That's that step. But the big one is it a question of the Constitution? They look at what's called a discuss list once a week. And then they'll decide, do we want to hear this? Is this important enough? The way it goes from a writ of certiorari to actually being a Supreme Court case is what we call the rule of four. If four justices state that they want to hear the case, it moves off the discuss list onto an actual, this is what we're dealing with. Right? But it takes a rule of four. It takes four justices before it moves into that. Right? The rule of four is what gets it off the discussion list and into the chamber. And this is a picture right here of the Supreme Court chamber. This is where they hear the cases. You can actually go visit that, not when they're in session, but you can go visit there and look at it. I've been inside, it's pretty cool. What factors play a part in deciding if a case will be heard? One of them is something called the Solicitor General. He is often known as the 10th member of the Supreme Court. Does anybody know what department he's a part of? He's in the bureaucracy, or she's in the bureaucracy. The Justice Department. The Solicitor General is the go-between between the executive branch of the United States and the Supreme Court. If the Solicitor General is the one doing the appeal, there's about an 80% chance that the Supreme Court is going to take the case. Right? If it's coming from the federal government, there's a good chance they're taking it. So he's the one who would be writing a writ of certiorari on the part of the government. If the federal government wants a case to be appealed, they'll deal with it. If there's a conflict between two lower courts, let's say the federal district court rules against you, Preston, and you appeal it to the circuit court and they reverse the ruling, but you don't like that reversal, right? Let's say that the appeal came from the prosecutors, because prosecutors could also appeal. So they appeal. It gets up and they reverse the ruling, you're not guilty.
And then you appeal again.
You appeal again, it's conflicts. So now the Supreme Court might take it. If there's interest groups backing it, once again, the amicus curiae briefs, if there's a lot of amicus curiae briefs coming in, they might take the case.
How often is it that you appeal and then they overturn the decision. Like, is that rare?
It happens. It happens. Like, let's say you're in a conservative state and it's something to do with marijuana and they declare you not guilty. The prosecutors might appeal it and the Court of Appeals might declare, oh, they got it wrong, reverse it, and then you appeal again. This is how all cases begin. There are oral arguments. Each side gets half an hour to speak. After half an hour, there's a light. It's going to go from green to red. The minute that thing goes red, you better stop talking. You do not get extra time. There's stories about one guy who just kept reading his argument. He looked up. All the justices had left the bench.
Oh my god, I read about that. That's
Right?
kind of funny.
They got up and left. You get 30 minutes. There's then questioning, where the 9 Supreme Court justices are going to ask questions. Right? They're trying to really figure out what's at the heart of this case. What does it mean? What are the big legal questions here? Once questioning is done, it goes into a closed conference. The newest member of the Supreme Court becomes what's called the doorkeeper. If they need more pencils, he opens the door and says, hey, we need more pencils. If they're thirsty, we need some more water, we need some more sandwiches. Right? He is there because nobody else is allowed in the room. You have to be one of the 9 justices to be in the room for this process. We then get the majority opinion and the dissenting opinions. Okay? The majority opinion, right, it might be 5-4, it might be 6-3, it might be 7-2, it might be 8-1. Sometimes they have unanimous, 9-0. Then you would only have a majority opinion. The majority opinion is written. It's a written document that lays out the opinion of the majority. So if they rule in favor, they would write a majority opinion in favor. If they're against, they would write a majority opinion against. And then the minority is the dissenting opinion. You can actually have multiple dissenting opinions. Let's say it's a 6-3 decision, but all 3 of the dissenters have different reasons for dissenting. All 3 of them might write a different dissenting opinion. But they might agree. The Chief Justice, if the Chief Justice is in the majority, they write or they decide who gets to write the majority opinion. If they're in the minority opinion, the dissenting opinion, they decide to write the dissenting or they decide who's going to write the dissenting. But there is one other type of opinion. It's called a concurring opinion. And this is the one that I think is the most fascinating. Let's say I'm part of the majority. And I agree with the ruling, but I disagree with their justification for the ruling. I can write what's called a concurring opinion, where I'm stating I agree with what was reached, but I disagree with how it was reached. And then I lay out with my thought train. These are the more interesting ones because these are the ones where you see real ideology come into play, right? Because they might have a very different reason for why something is the way it is. Any questions? Yeah.
How do you become Chief Justice?
You're selected.
Oh, okay.
The Chief Justice is selected. So when our current Chief Justice retires or dies, or, leaves, the president could either take somebody who's already on the court or pick a new person. But you're chosen by the president to be Chief Justice.
So you could be like the newest member. And could you be the no?
That'd be rare.
Wait, sorry. Are we done?
Hmm?
Are we done?
Yeah, we're done. We're done if there's no other questions.
So, just really, because, like, for number 10, we just